Allow 2 days to do the job properly. First, peg out a string line where the fence will run. Then measure and plan your fencing panel spacings, making sure to avoid 1 sheet or 4 sheet panels at the end of the fence run. Start at one end of the string line. Mark and then dig your first post hole. Hole depth will be determined by the soil type. With firm clay soil, as we have here, our hole will be 600 millimeters deep, and remember, holes should always be wider at the bottom than at the top, and at least 200 millimeters in diameter. Use a non-permanent marker pen to mark all channel posts on the inside to position the bottom rails. The mark is measured from the top of the post and is determined by the sheet length plus 10 millimeters. Fasten the posts together before installing them into the ground and ensure that the backs of the posts are aligned before fastening them together. The first and last post of the fence run must have at least a 50 millimeter square rolled hollow post in addition to the standard channel post on all freestanding ends. Channel posts are not designed to be freestanding. You'll need 9 self-drilling screws coloured to match the fence, spaced at 300 millimeter centres for each pair of 2400 millimeter posts. However, galvanized screws can also be used. And use a clutch drill to avoid over-tightening. The use of Gram's 10 by 16 by 13 self-drilling screws will prevent the sheets catching on the screws, making things much easier. Before you put the first post into the ground, fully mix the wet concrete according to the manufacturer's specifications. Contrary to popular belief, dry mix poured into a hole might seem convenient, but it doesn't offer the same performance as properly mixed concrete. Place your first post into the hole using a spirit level to align the post vertically in both directions and adjust it to the correct height. This will be a tapered panel where the lower end is 900 millimeters high. Gram strongly recommends tapering the first 2 panels of a fence where it extends beyond the front of a house. Tapering not only looks better than a stepped fence, but is much stronger than leaving it at full height. And remember that tapered panels require longer rails. Make sure to allow a minimum 50 millimeter gap between the fence and the ground to avoid any buildup of soil or garden fills. Now fill the hole with fully mixed wet concrete and ram with the spud bar to ensure the hole is fully packed. It's very important to make sure the top of the concrete slopes away from the post to drain away water. Use the bottom rail to determine the second post position, making sure the bottom rail lines up with your marks. Then fix the bottom rail with self-drilling screws to the first post. Place the next pair of channel posts, already fastened together, into the hole, making sure that for aesthetic purposes all screw heads are facing towards the front of the property. Align the post vertically with your spirit level in both directions and adjust to the correct height. Then fix the bottom rail with self-drilling screws to the post, maintaining the 50 millimeter gap between the ground and the bottom rail. Now fill the hole with fully mixed wet concrete, sloping the top away from the post. To finish the frame, take the top rail, place it on top of the posts, then mark and cut to the required length for the tapered panel. Place the appropriate rail into the posts, then fix on both sides with self-drilling screws. Don't fully tighten the screws at this stage, because these are removed later to insert your Gramline sheets. Make sure the top rail protrudes 2 millimeters above the top of the channel posts to provide a neat professional look and to reduce the risk of injury. Repeating these steps, you'll complete a fence for level ground. For sloping or uneven ground, Gram recommends sloping the panels for a stronger and better looking fence. The same installation procedures still apply, but we recommend clipping your string line to mark the bottom rail measurement and allowing for 50 millimeter continuous clearance between the fence and the ground. Remember to clean off any excess concrete and check the alignment of the fence at the end of each day. The concrete needs to cure overnight before installing the Gramline sheets, but longer periods of time may be required in harsher than normal weather conditions. Day 2, and we're now ready to finish off the job. First, check the posts and concrete are firmly set in the ground before fitting the Gramline sheets into the frame. Firstly, lay the Gramline sheets on the ground, making sure they're correctly lapped, that the profile is consistent, and being careful not to damage or scratch the sheets. Measure your installed frame to determine the required dimensions, marking the sheet to show where cutting is required. It's extremely important that nibblers or tin snips only are used to avoid damaging the sheets. Unscrew the top rail at the higher side of the tapered panel and fit the shortest tapered Gramline sheet into the bottom rail. Sheets must sit firmly against the inside of the channel post. Continue to fit the sheets, making sure they're lapped correctly, and pulling down the top rail as you go. A rubber mallet can be used to gently locate the top rail onto the sheets. If required, the sheets may be gently adjusted in a horizontal direction to make them lap properly. For a standard level panel, remove the screws from one side of the top rail and slide the first Gramline sheet into the bottom rail. Make sure the sheets sit firmly against the inside of the channel post. Continue to fit the sheets, ensuring they lap correctly and that the profiles are consistent. Pull down the top rail as you go and use a rubber mallet to gently tap the top rail onto the sheets. Next, refix self-drilling screws to the posts and rails, ensuring the screws are tight. Then follow the same procedure for all standard level panels. For sloping panels, longer sheets will be needed for the desired fence height. To work out the amount of cutting required for a full raked panel, first measure the amount of fall over the length of a full-sized 2.365 metre panel, and then divide this by 3. Each sheet will need to be cut top and bottom by this amount. Mark the sheets with a straight edge and cut them with a nibbler or tin snips. Nibbling up to 3 sheets together will save time. Unscrew the top rail at the higher side of the sloping panel and slide the first Gramline sheet into the bottom rail. Check that the sheet sits firmly against the inside of the channel post. Continue to fit the sheets, checking that they lap correctly. Pull down the top rail as you go and use a rubber mallet to gently tap the top rail onto the sheets. You may need to gently adjust sheets in a horizontal direction to make them lap correctly. Refix the self-drilling screws to ensure the screws are tight, repeating the entire procedure until all sloped panels are complete. Finally, check the installation and hose down the fence to remove any metal filings from the drilling and cutting.